Writer's Block, Sportsnet 590, The Fan, Ben Ennis, and Richard Deitch. And I like to play the hits. This is the last time I'll be able to say this, though. Got to remember, 10 games remaining for the Toronto Blue Jays against the Baltimore Orioles. Tomorrow, though, it'll only be 9. So this is the first of 10 remaining games against the worst team in all of baseball. Sort of, kind of took care of business against the Detroit Tigers over the weekend at Comerica. Richard, yeah, you had to win that series. The offense still hasn't come alive, but there's still a glimmer of hope that the door isn't slammed all the way shut on the Blue Jays' playoff chances.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, good to be with you, man. Yeah, I think that's true. And I think if you're a Blue Jays fan, you should try to be as optimistic as possible. Personally, I think there's a little too much ground to be made up. I hope that turns out to be incorrect. The only way, though, Ben, that this is even remotely possible, essentially, is not to lose a game to the Orioles. And then whether it's the Yankees or the A's or, fill in your other potential playoff team, you got to win that series. And you may need to do a 3 or 4, which against the Yankees, obviously that's a big ask just given how well they've played. But, the math is still there for things to happen. But, I think they're going to fall a couple games short. And I think when they look back on the season, they're going to look at like that national series. And they're going to look at a couple of games that were, that they lost in the 8th or 9th inning. But there is still time. I mean, that's the good news. And the one thing they have going for them is they do have a starting staff that should keep them pretty much in every game. What has been mind-blowing and befuddling is just how deep this slump has consisted with the offense and just their inability to do anything with RASP, with runs in scoring position, Ben, is just insane, just given where they were a month ago. It's like
they won a game yesterday. They went 0 for 10 with runners in scoring position yesterday and still won somehow.
Which is a nice win. I mean, again, I'm usually not a believer in momentum when it comes to hitting. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not one who's like, well, if guy X is hitting, then the whole team is hitting. But they are generally speaking in a team-wide slump, and they got to get out of it, and they got to get out of it quick. And I thought yesterday they would have gotten out of it. That bases loaded situation with nobody out. Just felt to me like, all right, here comes a 7 spot coming up, and obviously it didn't happen. I do think the return of Springer will be huge. I think, it just goes without saying, obviously, the back of his baseball card, he's an all-star, but the lineup just feels different. I don't know. I maybe it's something like maybe it's even a pressure thing. It just, whether it's Vladdy or Bo or whoever or Teo, there's less pressure on those big guys because there's another big guy in the lineup who, generally speaking, may pick you up. I don't know what it is, but they need him to play essentially. How many games left in the season? 30-something, right? They got to he's got to basically play, I would say, in almost every game, maybe short of 1 or 2 for the rest of the year.
Yeah, correlation's not causation, but if he returns tonight against, again, the worst team in all of baseball, the Baltimore Orioles, and they throw up a 10 spot or something, we're going to look at George Springer as the obvious MVP of this Toronto Blue Jay season. He has been great when he's been healthy, unfortunately for him. The health thing, it's kind of been an issue this year. When he comes back, though, and again, there was positive momentum towards his return. I thought there was positive momentum headed into Detroit. He didn't play in that series, but there was even more positive momentum, you thought, after yesterday's game that he might be in there today as the DH. If you're looking for a positive spin on what has been just a horrible offensive stretch, basically since the season looked like it was salvaged with that taking a 3 or 4 against the Boston Red Sox at Rogers Center, where, man, it really looked like we were headed for one of the more exciting August and September runs of baseball in the city since 2015, not so much 16, because remember, they just held on to a wild card spot in 2016, and that offense was pretty brutal down the stretch as well. But felt like it was like a 2015 run happening after that Red Sox series. And, of course, basically, that's when everything came unglued, and yesterday was the first series win since then. Since that Red Sox series, Blue Jays are only ahead of the New York Mets with runners in scoring position, and we know what the Mets have done this season. If you're looking for a positive reason, or a reason, if you're looking for a reason for the Blue Jays to flip the script on their offense over the last 2 weeks, it's been that's not sustainable. I don't believe, oh boy, and Kevin Barker's probably punching his radio. And who am I kidding? He's not listening. But if he were, he would punch his radio if he heard this, that I do not believe hitting with runners in scoring position is a repeatable skill. I think you can go through large stretches where you're really great at it, and then you can go through slumps with runners in scoring position, and there's no other explanation other than, boy, that was bad luck. So I think the Blue Jays for the last 2 weeks have been extremely unlucky. Now, that being said, they were extremely lucky for vast stretches of the season. That's why they've been so good offensively. But if you can get through the tough stretches and the schedule aligns the way it appears to be doing, then there's reason to believe they can go on some epic run with runners in scoring position. But like you said, yeah, the odds are against it. I think the Fangraph says their playoff odds is like minuscule, maybe under 5%. 5.5 with a month to go. It's been done before. I know there's a lot of teams that they have to pass, but all those teams that they have to pass have issues right now. I know the A's came up with a big back-to-back victories over the New York Yankees at home. Yankees, one of those teams maybe playing above their heads recently. Boston Red Sox are one of only 6 teams in Major League Baseball who have a vaccination rate under 85%. And one of their more important bats is on the COVID list, and he has been vaccinated, Kike Hernandez. So they got issues. Seems like the Seattle Mariners are coming a little bit back to earth. And all of a sudden, you mentioned it, the starting staff, the one of the big questions, because it's not Steven Matz, despite the fact that he's the fifth starter, now has an ERA better than Hyun-Jin Ryu. It was Jose Barrios in the 3-start stretch he went off after having 2 good ones after being acquired from the Twins. And I know it's the Tigers and it's not the 27 Yankees that he absolutely cut a swath through yesterday, but the reported mechanical adjustments, if that's all he needed to go back on a run and look like the guy that was shutting down the Royals and Red Sox when he first arrived, yeah, I'm not shutting the door. That's all I'll say.
I mean, again, nor should you. Each of the teams who are ahead of them certainly have issues, but they also present problems. The Red Sox have sailed back, so their pitching should be improved, although their bullpens have certainly been a little bit shaky. Yankees have looked great, but you'd have to think they'll cool down a little bit. The A's have some flaws, just like the Blue Jays. I just don't think this can happen, Ben, unless the team hits. At the end of the day, the lineup is such that there's an expectation that they can put up runs. I mean, you paid George Springer a ton of money. You have an MVP candidate in Vlad. You have one of the best young players in baseball in Bo. You have a guy who's having an incredible year and an all-star in Simeon. Lourdes Gurriel has always been an above-average hitter. Randall Grichuk has flaws, but again, if he's sitting at 7 or 8, he should be an excellent 7 or 8. And then the catching situation, I know you love your guy Kirk. He can hit. We'll see what happens with Danny Jansen. The reality is, this team has enough bats to hit.
Yeah.
And they haven't done that. So I think, to me, it's as important as the starters are. I don't think you're beating the Yankees or the Red Sox in September unless you beat them in some games 7-5, 8-7, 8-6. You know what I mean? That's the way. That's the road to the division. The road to the road to the wild card to me is ultimately these bats getting hot. And then, cross your fingers if you're a Blue Jays fan and just hope that Robbie Ray doesn't run out of gas. To me, he's been the MVP of the team. I know it's easy to say Vlad
unreal.
And you could say anybody else, but they're nowhere without that guy. That guy's, if he's not the Cy Young, he's in the conversation for 1, 2, or 3. And they've just gotten, I feel like they've gotten way more than they expected even out of Matz. Ryu has been good, not great, but again, I feel pretty good about him. And Manoah is the best rookie pitcher in the league. So, you hope that those guys continue. I think they will. I think the pitching staff should be there. I think the bullpen is now markedly better than it was a month and a half ago. It's not perfect, but even yesterday, you saw how you can win games without Romano, which I thought was huge, just to get that W. And so, now we see. But you're totally right. You can't. You have to basically blow the Orioles out of the water.
Yeah. And
just head into is it Oakland after that? Or is it somebody else?
No, it's the A's at Rogers Center for 3, and then they go
so you
got
to get on a
4.
run. You have to be on a 5-game winning streak to me, heading into that Oakland series. And then you have to win 3 out of 4 against the A's. And then that puts us around the 5th of September, right? Or the 6th. Mm-hmm. And maybe you're 4 out. At a great, if everything broke right, you're 3 out. of the wild card, and then it could get interesting. But that, to me, these 7 games, you have to win 6 out of these 7 games. I think anything less,
Yep.
You're not mathematically out of it. You know what I mean, Ben?
Yeah.
But, I feel like for all purposes, you're out of it.
Yeah. And my earlier tweet about the 12 games remaining between the Washington Nationals and Baltimore Orioles and the Toronto Blue Jays may have been overly aggressive, obviously, when the Blue Jays dropped those 2 games to Washington. Yeah, going 10-0 against the Baltimore Orioles, it doesn't feel realistic the way this team has swung the bats recently, but if you want to have a chance of getting back into this
You have to.
playoff picture,
They're a historically bad team.
Yeah.
You have to sweep them.
Yeah, and it's baseball, and sweeps even against bad teams are hard to count on or use as your goal. But I mean, just look at the standings and where we are in the calendar, and the Blue Jays obviously have to.
So in that case, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
I'm sure
go
you
for
agree
it.
with me on this. In that case, then, if you are Charlie and the organization, you have to play the Orioles games like it's do or die. You agree? No more of the let's get Gerard Dyson 4 at bats here. Maybe he will play just given the injury situation. But you know what I'm saying? You can't treat the Orioles like, all right, it's a July game. Let's give some of our backups a chance to play.
No,
you have to push. You have to. Every one of these Orioles games to me is as you have to approach it as must win as you would if you were playing the Yankees in the Bronx.
Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately for the Blue Jays, as it currently stands, their path to fielding the best lineup seems limited because when George Springer returns, and again, there's a possibility it's today, although I feel like I've been saying that for about 5 days. You know why? Because I've been saying that for about 5 days. But yeah, it really feels like today is the day at home. He's going to be the DH, and maybe the DH for the rest of the season, honestly. And I think the Gerard Dyson waiver signing maybe indicates that that's the case because if nothing else, and maybe Gerard Dyson is nothing else, he can play defense in center field. That eliminates, honestly, your 6th best bat from the lineup on days that he's not catching because you just glossed right over Alejandro Kirk, who is doing his best to revive this offense, Richard. And he has now, I think, become the number 1 catcher. There's no everyday catcher in the year 2021, and especially when your ability to stay healthy is probably limited when you're built like Alejandro Kirk. But what they could do before George Springer returned was give him the day off his feet catching on those off days and throw him into the DH slot, which they've been willing to do. And not a lot of teams like to do that, have both catchers into the game in case there's an injury. The Blue Jays haven't minded it. And maybe when rosters expand by 2 in September, Danny Jansen gets called up. But with Springer back, I mean, that hurts you at least a couple times a week, I think, because I truly believe that right now without Springer, Kirk is your 5th best hitter, and he might even be better than that. When Springer's back, it's your 6th best hitter in an offense that's struggling right now. He's like the only guy going. He and Lourdes Gurriel Jr., you can't afford to not play him right now, but unfortunately you're going to be stuck because if George Springer needs the DH spot, guess what? George Springer's going to get the DH spot.
Yeah, I mean, then you have to just figure out how much you want to play Reese McGuire versus Kirk. Obviously, Jansen's been hitting pretty good, it looks like, in Buffalo, so obviously he's going to be a factor in September. I have no problem with Gerard Dyson. Is it Gerard Dyson or Jared Dyson?
I've been going with Gerard.
Okay, Gerard Dyson. That's a fine defensive replacement in center field late innings. Actually, that's a good move to me. But you can't. That guy cannot be getting premium at bats early in games. So if that's the case, Ben, what do? You put Grichuk in center, Gurriel and Hernandez as your outfield. If Springer's your DH, then the real decision becomes Kirk McGuire behind the plate. I'm not, I know there's some people in sort of Blue Jays land who are not big fans of Kirk as a defender. He's not Reese McGuire, but I like if he's below average, he's not bottom of the league below average. You know what I mean? He's sort of, to me, he's serviceable if he hits.
Mm-hmm.
And you just are going to have to make a decision as a lineup in terms of what you need. If the rest of the lineup was rolling, Ben, then maybe you play Reese McGuire because he's certainly defensive, plus defender, and he'll give you that behind home plate. But the lineup's not hitting now. So I would play Kirk until that lineup gets going. And then if the lineup gets going, then I feel like, all right, maybe then you pick your spots from McGuire when you feel like, the rest of the bats are hitting and defense are important. But I don't disagree with you. Like, I heard you and JD talking about this morning. If you go down the lineup and you got runners on, second and third with 1 out or 2 outs, like, go down the lineup right now and ask yourself who you feel confident to get a hit in.
Yeah.
Kirk would be in my top 7 right now in terms of who I have confidence in.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's any doubt about it. We also talked about the manager this morning. So I don't want to rehash. I mean, my managerial take, and there's still so much to be decided when it comes to Charlie Montoyo this season. Because if the Blue Jays do the unthinkable and rattle off 10 out of 10 wins against the Baltimore Orioles and take care of business against the Oakland A's and surprise against the Yankees and Rays, and all of a sudden the Red Sox are melting down and you find yourself into the playoffs, there's just no debate. No matter how much of it is his responsibility, Charlie Montoyo he'll be carried off the field like Rudy. Like that's his job done if that's the case. But even just barely missing out on the playoffs this year, considering how flawed the teams ahead of you are, considering this run of play recently, would be a big disappointment considering the investment at the trade deadline, considering the investment before the trade deadline, let's not forget, with a couple of relievers. I wonder what you think about the future of Charlie Montoyo, Richard, because it's a tough one. And we know baseball's so different in 2021 when it comes to evaluating the manager. And Yankees fans had Aaron Boone fired like 300 times, I think, this season. And listen, I would put him in my top 5 American League Manager of the Year ballot. But again, there's still a lot to be written with the Yankees. I wonder where you think the Charlie Montoyo story goes from here.
Well, as a general rule, when it comes to sort of my sports observations, I tend to err on the side of giving coaches an additional year. Like, I think the revolving door of coaches for an organization usually, to me, speaks to issues with the larger organization. If you look at most sports, Ben, the best teams have stability in ownership, in management, in the coaching ranks. So I think Charlie's earned another year. I base that certainly on last year. They made the playoffs. Nobody expected that. I realize it's a COVID year and, crazy variables, but they did make the playoffs with that team. And, you have to me, sort of give him credit there. There are things this year that he's going to have to own. I think they have made some mistakes with pitching decisions, but that's so easy for me to say in the comfort of my home. You know what I mean? It's like literally the easiest criticism in the history of mankind is to sort of criticize managers when it comes to, pitching decisions, when to bring somebody in, when to take somebody out. And he had, if you look back, if you're going to be honest, and again, I'm no Charlie Montoyo flagbearer. I'm not saying the guy's Whitey Herzog, but if you look back, like at the beginning of the year, look at what this guy had in his bullpen. I mean, just be honest with yourself. Like, from Tyler Chatwood to the Carl Edwards Jr., and like the list goes on and on. He was not working with, really any kind of decent bullpen. And I think maybe in hindsight, he might have had one of the worst bullpens in the American League, Sans Romano.
Yep.
So I want to see how they finish, Ben. I want to see if they continue. To me, one of the things I judge managers, coaches on is how hard, how competitive is a team sort of to finish the year. And I think that's what you judge this on. Judge this on how the Blue Jays play in September. And did they make a run of it? Or did they basically just fold the tents up and by October 3rd, they're 10 out of the wild card and not 2 out of the wild card. So that would be a determination for me. But if I was Ross and company, I would give him one more year. I obviously would talk to all my players. I would, we don't know what's going on there. You'd want to find out how the players feel about how he's handled him. But, by and large, this team hasn't had any kind of external issues, right? There's no sort of whispering in social media or the press. It seems like the team keeps things in-house. So I personally, I don't know how you feel. I would give him one more year. I think he's earned one more year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a discussion, a popular topic of discussion this offseason. You're right. The final month will impact things a lot, but I keep coming back to the idea that this is such a pressure-packed season upcoming in 2022.
Agreed.
Not just for these young players, but for the front office who have not mortgage the future because, hey, Vlad and Bo, they're going to still be around, and Alec Manoah's only started.
You have to make the playoffs in 2022 just based on that trade.
Yep.
Don't you agree?
Oh, yeah. And maybe you re-sign Barrios. It doesn't matter. There's a ton of pressure next season, and the idea of having a bullet in the chamber if things go sideways and you're way out of the playoff picture or disappointing in June, that you can fire the manager then, and it's not a cure-all, and it doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. That might be something this front office is thinking about. Yeah, I tend to agree that he's probably not removed this offseason if they in fact are.
And you got to have somebody in mind. Like I don't know this. You're more familiar with this than me, but like who's the okay? If you get rid of Charlie, are you going to take somebody from your organization, from the Blue Jays organization, and bring him up, or is there somebody who is available with major league success out there?
Oh yeah. Well, the
that
guy
you feel you really like.
The guy that the rumors were swirling around him when he was hired into the organization, while John Gibbons was still the manager, was Eric Wedge, who apparently now is the baseball coach at Wichita State. Wonder if he'd be interested in leaving Wichita State.
I heard that too, but you've seen Eric Wedge's like managerial record, right? Like I don't see it. I know he's a Shapiro guy from Cleveland, but like, what am I missing?
No, you're right, and he hasn't been in the major leagues of baseball since 2013.
Exactly.
But here's the thing: what you're looking for, and what I think this front office was looking for, and still might be, if there is a change in the manager's office, is somebody to execute their game plan, somebody who they trust, somebody they have a good working relationship with. It's honestly why John Gibbons was brought back, because Alex Anthopoulos liked the guy. He knew that they could have an open line of communication, and he was a known commodity. I don't think.
Can I read you something quick?
Yes.
Who am I? 67 and 95, 75 and 87, 71 and 91.
You're probably Eric Wedge.
I'm Eric Wedge's 3 last years of managing in the majors.
Yeah.
Like that again. Like I'm certainly willing as a fan and as a observer to listen if you think there is somebody who can come in and immediately give you a couple wins over Charlie Montoya. It's not Eric Wedge. Just tell me who, you know what I'm saying? Like, tell me who it is.
It's so silly because I do like, I think changing the manager can change things. And there's parts of what Charlie Montoya does that I disagree with, especially strategically with the bunting. And I just like, I don't imagine he's going to change at this point of his professional career. But I also believe that it's mostly irrelevant. Like, it's mostly the players on the field. But that being said, so you don't just hand the franchise car keys over to your manager. Like, managers do get fired. They get fired for underperformance. So if the Blue Jays underperform and you think there'll be some very incremental increase in play, and I can honestly, during this stretch of 2 weeks, I can think of a couple of games that might have hinged on a managerial decision that I would have, in the moment, done the opposite of. And if that's the difference between you and a playoff spot, it's hard. I mean, that's pretty open and shut. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think, again, I like what he's done over the last 2 weeks. I feel like he's letting his starters go further. And that was one of the things earlier in the year that really did drive me crazy, is I feel like Charlie had a little bit of a quick hook with his guys. Now, he's going to know he and Pete Warkin are going to know his guys better. But, like, their bridge guys, Ben, were so bad.
Horrible.
That, again, I would rather have lived and died with a tired Ray, a tired Ryu, a tired Manoah, than bringing in some of the guys they were bringing in the 6 and 7.
Yeah, tough when Jose Barrios is in Washington telling you he cannot go further than 5 innings and he's thrown 80 pitches. But yeah, no, it's a good point. Jake Paul keeps winning. This is his most legitimate victory, despite the fact that it was Tyron Woodley's first ever professional boxing match. It's only a couple of years removed from being a very accomplished MMA fighter and fighting for championship belts in the UFC. But he loses to Paul in a split decision. We'll talk to Steve Bunce of BBC 5 Live and their boxing podcast. Next, it is Writer's Block. Ben Ennis, Richard Deitch, Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Writer's Block, Sportsnet 590 The Fan, Ben Ennis and Richard Deitch. And yeah, Jake Paul took a hard shot in the 4th round, almost went through the ropes, but hung in, and ends up winning a split decision yesterday against Tyron Woodley. Let's talk to Steve Bunce, boxing writer at The Independent and BBC 5 Live boxing podcast host. Steve, how's it going?
Fantastic, fellas. Good to be with you guys again.
Yeah, likewise. So, Paul, now 4-0, and he beats a guy who was making his professional boxing debut, but this is not necessarily a tomato can. Like, how much closer to legitimacy is Paul now?
Well, listen, we could have several debates here. So the first debate we need to have is that he is still a celebrity act who 2 years ago switched from being a YouTube prankster, a man who would walk with literally a fig leaf covering his privates along beaches in Los Angeles, film it, get 4 million hits and make about $60,000 to becoming a real fighter. Now, is he a real fighter yet? No. But what four-bout novice is a real fighter? The answer to that is simple. None. Tyrone Woodley was a test, and I'll tell you for why. And there's a good debate in boxing between boxing fans and fans of the UFC and MMA. The UFC and the MMA, they say, men are tough. They can take anything. They can do anything. Well, think about this. Less than 3 years ago, Tyrone Woodley was a UFC champion, okay? Not 10 years ago, not 15 years ago, less than 3. And what's more, the man he beat in, I think, his last successful defense, which was less than 3 years ago, on Saturday, he tops a UFC bill. So Tyrone Woodley was what we call in the boxing business live. Sure, he'd never had a fight, but he's been in the fighting business, the combat sports business, for 20 years. It was a test for Jake Paul. He was hurt. He was staggered. He came through. He survived. He went 8 hard rounds.
That's well said, Steve. And we appreciate your enthusiasm. So this is less of a question and sort of more of a thought exercise, and you should just pick up after I'm gone. Like, I have respect for Jake Paul. Like, he's gone in there, and whatever level he's at, he's fighting these guys. He's clearly training. He's obviously a guy who's trying to hype a fight. Doesn't make any different than Mayweather. What I'm curious for someone like you, someone who covers and has covered boxing for a long time, is it seems there is a massive interest, particularly for males between the ages of like 18 and 35 who have discretionary income, who love to gamble. There's a massive interest in this like celebritization of combat sports where you have guys like Jake Paul or his brother or, whoever, name your favorite YouTuber, going in some kind of competition where they put it on pay-per-view and people will pay for it. So I'm curious from your perspective, like ultimately, can the traditional world of boxing live with this new world, or does ultimately someone like, let's say, Canelo Alvarez have to eventually fight a Jake Paul simply because the money is just going to be so insane to pass up? Like, what I'm curious about is like, can these two worlds live with each other? Do they ultimately have to morph together? What's going to happen?
Well, they're all, at the moment, they're fighting under the same umbrella, the same licensing organization. There's not a celebrity boxing license issued by Nevada or issued by the Texans or issued by the people in Ohio. They're fighting with legitimate boxing licenses. And in theory, they're fulfilling different criteria to get that license. And boxing will have to live with it. It will have to adapt. I've had maybe today 100 phone calls or texts or emails from people saying, Steve, how can you take that stance? Bumpy, how are you defending these guys? I've had it non-stop, trust me. But I'm from all around the world. New Zealand, I've done New Zealand today. I've done all different parts of Britain I didn't even know existed. Because I think people expecting me to be an old, miserable, fat cynic and say it's a disgrace. Well, here's my little insider is I've got to cheat. Back in 2019, I went to Los Angeles with the BBC to cover Jake's brother, Logan. And I got to know Logan and Jake. And they're a couple of, let's put it this way, they were not born anywhere near a silver spoon. They packed up their bag, they packed up their wagon, and they left Ohio, made their way to LA, made their millions, and then decided a couple of years ago, you know what? I like boxing. It's been good for training. Let's have a go at this. They take it seriously. They train hard. And you know why they train hard and why they take it seriously? Because it's generating for them so much money. And that's what's really upsetting the purists. The purists are saying, how is this four-bout novice making millions? How's he topping the bill when all these legitimate fighters out there are not getting the money. Well, you can't give a guy that sells 300 tickets $10 million for a fight, can you? It just doesn't work that way. So I think the boxing business is slowly having to come round and see that Jake Paul and his brother, they're not the apocalypse. They're not bringing the end of boxing. And I'll tell you for why. The WBA, the World Boxing Association, the oldest sanctioning body in existence. It was formed the year before the WBC in the early 60s. They currently have, and you'll love this, there are 17 weight divisions in boxing. So you'd expect a sanctioning body to have 17 world champions, wouldn't you? No, because the WBA, formerly of Caracas in Venezuela, now of Panama City in Panama, they've got 54. They haven't got a calculator between them. They've got 54 world champions. And when, you'll love this, when Saul Canelo Alvarez failed a drug test, the head of the WBA said there's no problem with him fighting. It will add spice. The man failed a drug test. I'm not lying. I don't want to get you guys sued. I've said it on the BBC.
Yeah.
So that's the apocalypse. Jake Paul, with his knowing winks and his training and his rawness, he's not the apocalypse. He's a sideshow attraction.
No, and you know what, Steve? I've been shocked at how many legitimate boxing journalists, analysts have the same opinion, that this is kind of the way of the world when it comes to boxing. If you've been paying attention for basically the entirety of its existence, you command the eyeballs, you command these pay-per-views and perhaps better and better matchups. You mentioned he's only a four-match novice here. He's 24 years old, about to be 25 in January. Yeah. I don't know. Give me some boxing history. What he could potentially become. Is there the potential for an upward trajectory for him? Can he get better? Is he getting better?
Yeah, he's getting better. He's improving, but there is a limit on where he can be. So if we were in, if I'm in your studio there and I knew more about Canada, other than it's the second greatest country in the world, which I thought I'd say, because why not? Because it really, I know it's good.
That's what you said to New Zealand. When you went on New Zealand radio today, you said the same thing. You said
Steve,
you love Lord of the Rings.
You were on Cuban radio earlier. I heard you. You said the exact same thing.
That's not true. To the New Zealanders, I said it's the greatest country in the world. You're second to the New Zealanders, trust me. So quite seriously, if I knew the regions in the different states in Canada, I'd say this guy can win a regional title, maybe a state title, and we might push him towards a national title if there was a weaker champion. Because what he is, he's really strong. I think he's got a good chin and he's got desire. Because of his millions, he can go on the best diet. He can train around the world. He can get on a plane with his trainer, a private plane, and fly to Florida for hot weather training if it ever gets cold in LA. He's got all of the advantages that major world champions have. So he can get himself in a great condition. And because of that, some guys who are part-time pros or maybe struggling in life, they've got problems. This guy hasn't got a problem in the world. He can just get on with it. How far can he go? At best, in British terms, he would maybe get himself into an eliminator for a British title. That's in these terms. But we're not talking about normal boxing. We're talking about the wild world of Jake Paul and other YouTubers. And it's a slightly different sport. They take it as seriously, I assure you, as the poorest kid in the poorest gym, in the poorest slum anywhere. It's just they don't have the problems and the worries that kid has. And that makes them slightly dangerous, if you want my opinion.
It's interesting. Steve, I got one more for you.
Go on, Sam.
So, to me, and again, you're the expert, so educate me on this. My thought when it comes to Jake Paul and his handlers, the reason why this works is that he's undefeated. And the hook for everybody is, can this so-called legitimate combat fighter, like Tyrone Woodley was, like whoever the next guy is going to be, can this person be the one to finally beat Jake Paul? Because let's be honest, a lot of people are paying money to see Jake Paul get his butt kicked. Let's just be honest. That's the hook. So if you are Jake Paul, and this would be sort of your world, is there a way, can you design opponents? Let me ask it this way. How long can you design opponents where you have a realistic chance of winning without bringing in somebody who's like a legit boxer who ultimately will just destroy you?
Well, Jake Paul and his people are really smart people as well. They get the idea they're sort of just, happy-go-lucky guys zipping in and around LA. No, they're really smart businessmen. They're astute businessmen. This is why they're so successful. They've got a big plan, and that plan's probably got 6 or 7 moves with 5 or 6 alternatives to those 6 or 7 fights. Right now, there's a really good chance of a rematch with Tyrone Woodley, and I think Jake Paul would win that easier because I don't think he'd repeat some of the mistakes. And I don't know if you know, Tyrone Woodley can have the rematch if he gets a tattoo on his leg saying, I love Jake Paul. Mm-hmm. Millions will watch that, you know that. And on the undercard, there was a guy from a show called Love Island in Great Britain who happens to be Tyson Fury's brother, Tommy Fury. He fought on the undercard. It was an audition. It didn't quite go to plan because it went the full 4 rounds. Had Tommy Fury knocked out his opponent in 1 round, he would have been on a very short list to fight Jake Paul. The Jake Paul people know that when they lose, they've got a chance of a rematch, and then that's it. If they lose the rematch, it's out of business, and he goes into Indianapolis 500. He goes into, long-distance swimming. I don't know. He goes into some other sport. It's as simple as that. It's cynical. It's true. But I swear to you, and this is the bizarre thing, this is what's upsetting so many of my colleagues, he means it. He wants to be a fighter.
Well, for one night at least. Steve, this was great. Thanks so much for doing this.
My pleasure, fellas.
All right, there's Steve Buntz, boxing writer at The Independent and host of BBC Radio's 5 Live
and a very big
podcast.
deal in that world. Like, I was checking his bio out.
Oh, yeah.
So here's my thought on this. I actually think Steve was great. I love British accents or Australian accents. He's also right about New Zealand, and honestly, maybe the best country in the world. Anyway, yeah. So here he nailed it. And here's my thought. I'm curious about you. One, I would never pay a single dollar for this nonsense. Doesn't make me better than you. I have seen. You write about media as long as I have. I've seen this carnival down the track many times, and you're not taking my $80. But I'm also not the demo they're trying to go for. So that's that. But he nailed it. Like, ultimately, Ben, this only works if Jake Paul can win, correct?
Yeah.
And if he loses once, as Steve said, then one thing is left, the rematch.
Yeah.
So I guess, and let me throw this back to you because you're younger than me. Like, are there enough of these guys where you can make this thing last for like 5 or 8 matches? You know what I mean? Like, are there enough Tyrone Woodley-ish type of opponents where you could keep selling this to the public? Because to me, your average Joe, like, if I heard Canelo Alvarez was fighting him, like, I'm like, okay, I actually may pay attention to this because I can't see any possible way he would ever beat a guy like that. But, maybe I'm paying a lot of money to see somebody finally shut up Jake Paul. So I'm curious, like, are there enough opponents out there where the public will buy Jake Paul fighting 41-year-old former MMA guy? You know what I mean? 39-year-old former MMA guy or some dude who was on a reality show whose brother's a boxer. Like, no, how long can this go?
What we're headed towards, in my opinion, this is coming from someone with no real background in combat sports at all, and casual is the best I can describe. Like, that's maybe an improvement over the actual type of combat sports fan I am. But casual at absolute best, here's where it feels like it's going, is Jake Paul versus Conor McGregor, right? And it's somewhere along the lines of Tyrone Woodley. McGregor has been in a real professional boxing match against the greatest of all time and held his own for a good portion of time. I was entertained
or
by...
the other guy held him.
Right. Yeah. And I was entertained by that. It feels like we're headed towards that. And would that not be the biggest number?
Yeah,
like that's the dream for these matchmakers, for the potential pay-per-view people. That's the be all end all.
I mean, and as sad as it is with the greats like Ali and Hearns and Hagler and Tyson, all these guys, that's probably the biggest. That's the biggest fight of all time, right? Biggest combat sports boxing fight. I guarantee the money made on that fight would be bigger than anything. So both those guys should want that. Like, if you're Conor McGregor, like, does it matter anymore, like, what your results are in MMA? I mean, you've lost your last couple matches. It seems like you're never going to be back to what you once were. So why not just cash the massive paycheck? And if you're Jake Paul, like, so what if you lose to Conor McGregor?
No.
You probably can even figure out a way to spin that.
Yep.
If you end up losing. So That to me makes it. I like that. That makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah, again, I could be way off, but it feels like there's been enough sniping between the two. They have responded to each other before that we're headed towards that. I don't know if it's happening next. It's probably the rematch against Woodley. Then maybe because that could be it for. But no, you probably rematch that one too. But yeah.
By the way, am I allowed to feel bad for like the boxer who like doesn't have this kind of fame, is some great like middleweight 17-0, or some woman who's like 15? They're never going to even come close.
No.
To ever getting this kind of publicity, right?
Yeah.
I know that's the realities of the market, but that kind of sucks.
No, you're allowed to feel bad for them, but that's not just the reality of the market. That's the reality of the sport. That it's never been organized in a fashion where it's a meritocracy. That's you got to sell yourself, and it stinks. And yeah, obviously there's more deserving fighters than Jake Paul, but it's all about dollar bills and selling pay-per-views, which he's been able to do. And a fight against Conor McGregor would do plenty of that. It's about the fans. Just try to tell that to Javi Baez, who would disagree. Maybe we'll have time to get to that next. And what's going on in Queens right now. It is Writer's Block. Ben Ennis, Richard Deitch, Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Writer's Block, Sportsnet 590 The Fan, Ben Ennis, and our New York correspondent, Richard Deitch, who's now Canadian. How's that citizenship coming along? How long do you have to be here before you can apply for citizenship?
Well, before we even do that, like the live audience heard Wu-Tang Clan's Cream. That does not appear on the podcast if you're listening to this later, right?
That's right.
So that was Derek Brandeo. That's a very great drop, obviously, after the Jake Paul nonsense that we just talked about. So well done on that. In terms of, listen, permanent residency is a multiple year process, and very much helped by if you're working in a big place like Rogers. So shout out Rogers lawyers, etc. Citizenship is different though, Ben.
Yeah.
You have to you got to take a test and go through it, and then I really actually haven't looked into this, but I believe, and if there's a lawyer out there, I apologize, I blow this, but I believe that as an American citizen, I can have dual citizenship with the U.S. and Canada.
Yep.
I don't have to give up my U.S. citizenship, but I couldn't do the reverse.
Is that right?
You have to. I think if you are a Canadian citizen who wants U.S. citizenship, I think the U.S. then says that you can't be a dual the other way. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's from my understanding.
Well,
anyway,
you know what? None of that is going to change the fact that you spent many, many years in around New York City. So you are well positioned to give us a sense of
spent many days at New York Mets games. I was in that crowd many times.
Yeah, I've been to Shea Stadium. I've been to Citi Field, in fact, and it's beautiful. I can't wait. Are the Mets at home today? I hope they are. If they're not, I can't wait for them to return home to see the kind of response that Javi Baez gets after giving the home crowd the thumbs down yesterday after a victory and said, quote, we're going to struggle 7 times out of 10. It just feels bad when I strike out and get booed. Doesn't really get to me, but I want to let them know that when we're successful, we're going to do the same thing to let them know how it feels. If we win together, then we got to lose together, and the fans are a really big part of it. In my case, they got to be better. All right. I absolutely needed this on August 30th. We're still a ways away from training camp opening up for the Toronto Maple Leafs and Raptors, and the NFL season still more than a week away. Needed this content. Richard, how are the fans of the New York Mets in Queens going to receive this when Javi Baez steps onto the field today?
Well, I mean, listen, it's a tabloid town. You know they're not going to receive it well. I mean, Met fans versus Met fans is one of the great rivalries ever. So, I have to me, if you pay to sit at an arena, you have every right to boo, no matter what that sport is. It does at times seem silly. We talked about this pre-show, Ben, that you're sort of booing people. I don't think ultimately changes performance. Maybe you let the front office know how you feel, but it's not gonna sort of motivate an athlete to play better. But Javi Baez, while I appreciate his honesty, obviously as someone who's interviewed billions of athletes, it's kind of an insane move to sort of basically say, I'm going to give my finger to the fans. Like, what on earth could he expect? It's one thing to say, like, the fans should treat us, the fans shouldn't boo. We're working our ass off here. It's ridiculous. And, I'm ticked off about it. Like, that's one thing. It's another thing to be like, we're actively going to do these signals to sort of F you, the fans, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know what the Mets would expect other than to be booed significantly the next time they're playing in front of their fan base.
Oh, yeah. No, this is horrible for every player in that clubhouse, whether they agree with Javi Baez did or not. It is not going to be a comfortable situation when they take to the field at Citi Field tomorrow against the Marlins in a game they could easily win because the Marlins aren't very good. And Sandy Alderson, the president of the Mets, had a statement, and they tried to tamp down the flames of this. What's interesting that there's so many levels of intrigue to this. And like you, I'm so glad that he said it, not just for the content, but just, hey, listen, the diversity is interesting. And the idea that we would get an unfiltered view of how these players actually feel about what's happening is intriguing. But that we've gotten to a place in professional sports, in the take culture, that an athlete, and maybe that he didn't put as much thought into it as assuming he would, because, man, you're talking to the biggest media market in the world, New York freaking city. You're not the Yankees, but you're talking to the New York media, that there would be an athlete who could think that saying, I think the fans don't treat us enough like human beings because they boo us, even though I'm trying my best, that he could think that would not be received in the way that it is obviously going to be received. I think speaks to the way the player empowerment movement has happened over the last half decade.
Well, yeah, we need more time to do this one. Again, to me, there's a difference between sort of having that conversation, which is an interesting one, and here's my hand signal to sort of F you, the fans. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you want to have the intellectual discussion, I actually think it's a really interesting one about player empowerment. But Baez, by just the whole, like, we're going to kind of do this, it's like what the Maple Leafs did. It's just like, look at us. We have this little secret handshake to sort of screw you guys. To me, if you want to have the real conversation, there's a better way to do it. But
yeah, well, maybe we'll have that later on. We have a little more time because we're up against it. And we got to talk to Renaud Lavoie of TVA Sports about whether the Canadians are going to match the offer sheet for Jesperi Kotkaniemi. That's coming up. Writer's Block, Ben Ennis, Richard Deitch, Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Writer's Block, Sportsnet 590 The Fan, Ben Ennis and Richard Deitch. And yes, thank you to Javi Baez for the content. Thank you to Tom Dundon for the content. You don't necessarily think of the Montreal Canadiens and Carolina Hurricanes having this incredible rivalry. And perhaps it will not translate to the ice next season. But definitely in the front office, things are interesting as the Hurricanes have signed Jesperi Kotkaniemi to an offer sheet worth north of $6 million, which means they'd have to give up a first and a third round pick. If the Canadians fail to match it, they have a week to do so. Let's talk to Renaud Lavoie of TVA Sports, who's on the line right now. How's it going, Renaud?
On vacation, but obviously for the people working in the business right now, I'm pretty sure that they're really happy. I'm going to tell you that for dinner with the family at 5:30 Saturday night, I was a little upset.
Yeah, I'll bet. That's no fun. Yeah, usually all this stuff is supposed to be taken care of in early July, and then you can just put your feet up for the rest of the offseason. But this one is a bomb dropped out of nowhere. What is the sense amongst the hockey people that you've talked to since this has happened about how legitimate this is and how much of, like, not a publicity stunt, but how outside of the norm of hockey is what we've seen here?
Well, it is, because there's a third between two organizations right now. It's obvious. This is a way for the Hurricanes to say, you know what, you tried on Sebastian Aho. You expected us to in a way, that we would say, okay, no problem, take Aho, and we're going to take the picks in return because we're not capable of paying those signing bonuses inside that contract. And I guess they were a little upset about that. In a way, it's a way to say, we're going to, at one point, make sure that we're going to be even. So that's what they're doing right now. The big difference for me is if you look at Sebastian Aho's contract, $8.4 million per season, he deserves every penny of that contract, I believe, the way he was playing before and the way he is playing right now. And if you're looking at Jesper Kotkaniemi, $6 million deal right now for 1 year, there's no way that Jesper Kotkaniemi should, be paid that amount. There's a possibility that there's a side deal between the Hurricanes and Kotkaniemi that if he's staying, he's going to sign for less money starting January 1st when he can have an extension. But even if he's got an AAV of $4 million, it doesn't make sense either. So, I mean, you need to prove yourself, I believe, to get big money. And yes, Perry's a young kid, great upside, no doubt about that. But if you look at the way he started his career, he was a really good forward offensively. Defensively, he was not great. He's better now defensively, but offensively, he's not the player that people expect him to be. So that's where there's a problem. And I believe that, there's a lot of people who thinks that it's approve in a way what the Hurricanes did, just to tell Marc Bergevin, the Canadiens, well, gotcha. But, I mean, you need to think a little bit about what you're doing here, and I'm not convinced it's a smart move by the Hurricanes.
So, Ren, if you're Marc Bergevin, how are you approaching this right now in terms of thinking about the many different scenarios you can go? Obviously, at the end of the day, you either match it or you don't. But, there is compensation coming back if you decide to let him go. Yeah. You would know better than us what the Canadians truly think of the players. So what do you think Bergevin and his staff are doing at the moment, given there's a time limit on this?
We need to look back at what happened, first of all, at the end of the Stanley Cup final. It was a healthy scratch for the last two games. He played well during the playoffs, scored some big goals. But, at one point you need to realize who's helping your team and who's not, and versus a great team like the Tampa Bay Lightning. Perry's game was not up to par, so that's why they decided to scratch him. After that, there was a meeting, an exit meeting with him. It's something that Dominic Ducharme mentioned, that he met with KK, and he told him that the expectations are really high now, and they expect him to be a way better player than he is right now, and that he needs to take another step. So if you're asking me what the team thinks about Kotkaniemi, here we go. They're looking at him. They see a diamond, but still in the rough, and that needs to be polished. And it's on him in a way, as much as you can coach a player. And I think it's important to do it the right way. You need to make sure that player is going to respond. And I'm not convinced that Jesper Kotkaniemi is responding all the time the right way. That being said, I'm gonna remember everyone that he's only 21 years old, right? Yeah. But still, is it? Even before that offer sheet, if you asked me a week ago, Renaud, is it 100% certain that Jesper Kotkaniemi will start the season or will continue his career with the Montreal Canadiens? My answer would have been 50-50. Okay, there's still a chance. Now it's impossible, but before that offer sheet, there was a chance that Jesper was involved in any deal involving the Canadiens. And that's not saying that that's what Marc Bergevin told us at the exit meeting. He never used these words, but he mentioned that it was important to protect Jesper Kotkaniemi in a way when he's looking at all his sentiment. There's a lot of young players there, and he wanted to make sure that maybe another sentiment was coming in. With, I guess, maybe not a veteran sentiment, but a player with more experience coming in and help his team. And so I guess that there was a real possibility that Jesper Kotkaniemi could have been traded during the off season. Now you need to face reality. Reality for Marc Bergevin is, if he's saying to Kotkaniemi and the Hurricanes, well, we're going to match the offer. So Jesper Kotkaniemi is going to make $6.1 million this season and another $6 million next year because of his qualifying offer. That's $12 million for a guy that you're not even sure is going to score 15 goals next year. You're not convinced that player can score 15 goals. So it's a lot of money. And the problem that I see, and this is because of the market, okay, if Jesper Kotkaniemi signs with the Canadiens, if the Canadiens are saying to Kotkaniemi, come back, and we're going to give you $6 million next season, no problem. Fans are not going to be upset in Montreal. They like him, okay? What will be the situation, let's say, in January if he has only 3 or 4 goals, 5 goals? How people are going to react to that?
Yeah.
People are going to be upset. Mm-hmm. And in a way, it's unfair for the kid. But in a way, he put himself in that situation. Nobody put a gun on his face and say, you need to sign this. He's a happy man today. Yeah. He's got a lot of millions in front of him. Good for him, okay? But it could easily turn ugly here in Montreal if you're not capable to play at the level that you're supposed to with the money that they're throwing at you. And in Carolina, I don't think it's going to be a big problem for him. But in Montreal, it is. Yeah,
I'll take $6 million to score 0 goals. That's fine. I'll take the higher. Yeah, that's no problem for me.
Anytime.
Talking to Renaud Lavoie. So maybe this is the wrong guy, right? But in theory, isn't this the way the offer sheet should work? And it seems it's a ton of money. I get that, but isn't that the whole point? If it was something in or around the ballpark that he should be earning, then Montreal would match it, right? In theory, because I understand everything you're saying, and Kotkaniemi, at times during the playoffs did resurrect himself a little bit. But yes, we understand the offensive side of his game has not quite developed. But you mentioned he's 21. The idea that he would earn $6 million seems a little bit outsized. But yeah, the idea that you would overpay for a guy in an offer sheet to pry him away from a team that has cap issues and push them to the limit of what they could do, in theory, isn't this the way offer sheets are supposed to work?
Totally. But there's the other side, right? The Hurricanes did that to the Montreal Canadiens. There's a reason why. It's because of this Sebastian Howe offer sheet that was given 2 years ago. The only reason why. It's just the Hurricanes saying, we're going to get you, and we're going to try to put you in a bad place. But it's coming from a team who said to Dougie Hamilton, we're going to only give you $6 million per season. It's coming from a team who traded one of his really young goalie. I mean, for technically no reason other than we don't want to pay you. It's coming from a team who said to all the possible UFAs coming in this year, we don't want to give you tons of money. We don't want to throw money at you. We want you to play for the Hurricanes for the right reason. That's the way they approach the UFA market. We don't want to throw money at you. Mm-hmm. We want you to play here for the right reasons. It's all right. No problem with that. But what does it say is we don't have any money to pay you, buddy. So come here on the cheap, okay? And we're going to be happy to have you on our team. And it's going to work out, okay? But at the same time, you're looking at an RFA player who's playing like a fourth-line player if you look at his numbers, okay? And you're throwing at him $6 million for next season. Mm-hmm. I mean, I understand that you're upset with what happened 2 years ago. Totally understandable if you're that type of person, okay? But you're not throwing money to Nick Suzuki. Mm-hmm. Nick Suzuki is a great centerman. You could have even wait a year we don't know if Nick Suzuki in a year will be signed by now. I think so. We all know yes, but why not giving him an offer sheet in early July if that contract is not signed? Mm-hmm. So why are you taking a risk with Jesperi Kotkaniemi? Why are you sending the message that you have a lot of money for a player that he doesn't deserve that amount, that kind of money? And at the same time, you're looking to good players that were on your team, and you try then to sign them on the cheap. I mean, it's tough to understand. Honestly, The only thing is revenge, call it, you can use whatever the words you want to use, but at the end of the day, it's not it's a situation between the Hurricanes and the Montreal Canadiens. That's it. That's all.
Yeah, but is that the worst thing in the world? That you have two front offices and an ownership group in Carolina that hates another team and they want revenge? I mean, I would say from where I'm sitting, that's kind of fun.
It is. It's great. And I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying that if you look, it's in a way, it's childish. And I mean, man up. You got an offer sheet. One of your players received an offer sheet 2 years ago. And when you look at that offer sheet, it totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. You're not happy, but that offer sheet, if you look at Sebastian Aho, $8.4 million per season, totally makes sense. $6 million at Jesperi Kotkaniemi, no problem. If it's your money, you can do whatever you want with your money. But is it the right guy? Are you picking the right guy? Should have maybe wait another year. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I'm not convinced that Jesperi Kotkaniemi is the right guy right now to receive an offer sheet of $6 million for next season. I mean, I was doing a radio at Sportsnet Vancouver earlier this morning, and they asked me, Renaud, it must be a front page story at Montreal. It's not even a front page story. You know why? Because it's a total joke. It doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why Journal de Montréal. It was easy for them to put that story in first page of the Journal de Montréal on a Sunday morning. They didn't do that. They didn't do that this morning either. Why? Because it's billionaires trying to have fun with their money and just, trying to make sure that they'll be in the media for a while. But it makes no sense. If it would have been, I'm telling you, if it would have been Nick Suzuki,
oh yeah,
it would have been front page.
Yeah, no doubt.
It would have been front page.
Yeah, first and a third round pick will be nice compensation. Before we let you go, Ren, I saw a report out of like a Russian news source that Rene Fassel, the IIHF president, was talking about the end of the month as potential news about the NHL to the Olympics. Are you hearing anything in that regard? I think it's a done deal. I mean, it's in the minute, and I think it was 2 weeks ago that it was reported that the IOC will pay the COVID insurance and the health insurance to the players. That was, in a way, a done deal. Everybody was just waiting for that. I don't think the NHL is going to say anything against that possibility. When you look at the way they build the schedule, they knew it was a real possibility. Personally, I just don't understand how an athlete representing any country can go in China next year. It's mind-boggling. And personally, this is me talking. I can't believe it. If I was an athlete, I wouldn't even think about going in China to be in the Olympics. But that's another story. If the players wants to go, they can do whatever they want. But in China right now, this is not a country I want it to be. I'm telling you. Renaud, appreciate the time. Thanks for this. Have a good one. All right. There's Renaud Lavoie, TVA Sports. Man, the NHL, this has been happening for years and years and years. That's been the old boys club in front offices around the National Hockey League. And it started with, Brian Burke talking about fighting people in barns, signing players to offer sheets, forcing him into contracts he didn't want to sign. the Players Association and the owners negotiated offer sheets in good faith for this, maybe not this exact purpose. Because again, Jesperi Kotkaniemi hasn't done anything close to earning more than $6 million a year as a guy who's a healthy scratch during the playoffs, as Ren mentioned last season. But he showed flashes at times. He's a good defensive player. But the whole idea of an offer sheet is that you can steal a guy away because you view him as more valuable than the other team. And it's not like the Canadians get nothing, a first and a third round pick, which is probably more than should be expected to, or about the same that you would expect to get for Kotkaniemi on the open market. I love this. This should be happening more. We should have more front offices, ownerships throwing barbs at each other and trying to steal the other's players.
I think it's great. I love it. I mean, I love the pettiness of it. I love the fact that they waited a couple of years where they could try to send it back to the Canadians and screw with them. I think it's fun for sports. Obviously, it's not fun for the front offices of each team. I would love, I mean, again, I expect them to match, Ben. I would love for them not to match. I think that would be awesome.
Oh, I don't think they are. I don't think
you think they're going to. That would be great.
Yeah.
Because I think Carolina is calculating that they will. Mm-hmm. And so I would love to see them not match it, get some compensation. Kotkaniemi should be, even if he wants to be in Montreal, should be psyched. I mean, he's getting a gigantic raise. That would be just totally fascinating. If they do not match, from what I read, at least from the people who cover the Hurricanes, the way the Hurricanes get around it is our old friend Jake Gardner becomes available, basically, because that's where the money is going to come from. But I think it's, I like it. I mean, I think Hockey's had a lot of these gentleman agreements where you don't do this kind of stuff, but I think it's very interesting for the league.
I love it. And I think it should be happening more and more and more. And I thought the Leafs were going to run into some trouble when they had Kasperi Kapanen as a restricted free agent and Andreas Janssen, and nobody jumped in because those guys were mid-tier, where I think it was only going to cost somebody a second-round pick if they signed him to an offer sheet, which would have made it difficult for the Maple Leafs to match. It didn't happen. This is a little bit north of that when you're talking about a first-round pick. But, yeah, it's supposed to be normal business as usual. You don't hear the same types of conversations in the NBA when somebody's signed to an offer sheet, do you? You don't. No, and there's restricted free agency and there's compensation rules in that league as well. So, hopefully more of this happens in the future. But I've said that before, and it really does feel like they're one-offs. Hopefully this is a one-off for Felix Auger-Aliassime at the U.S. Open, not winning a match, but a first-round match against an unseeded opponent that was a grind. He won it in 4 sets, but all 3 of his set victories were in tie breaks. He's through, though. What does that mean for him? Denis Shapovalov's the 7 seed on the men's side. What are his chances? And, of course, Bianca Andreescu making her return to Flushing Meadows after the year off last year. We'll talk to John Wertheim, a Tennis Channel analyst and senior writer at Sports Illustrated next. It's Writer's Block, Ben Ennis, Richard Deitch, Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Writer's Block, Sportsnet 590 The Fan, Ben Ennis and Richard Deitch. And just moments ago, Felix Auger-Aliassime surviving in around 4 hours against qualifier Evgeny Donskoy, 7-6, 3-6, 7-6, and 7-6. And so he is through to the second round of the U.S. Open. Let's talk to John Wertheim, Tennis Channel analyst and senior writer at Sports Illustrated. How's it going, John? Oh, we're getting John on the line right now. But that's a pretty harrowing way to start your U.S. Open if you're Felix and you're a top 15 seed, and you're talking about a guy who going into this thing was ranked 131st in the world, has never won an ATP Tour title. He's 31 years old. This is man, the thing about Grand Slam tennis is that it is a grind. 2 weeks playing 5-setters to start your tournament off with a 4-setter in 4 hours. That's rough, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you'd rather have a better start. The whole goal of these majors, Ben, is to get out of matches as quickly as possible. The one sort of caveat here for Felix is he's young.
Yeah.
So, it's the pounding on 20-year-old legs is very different than the pounding on 30-year-old legs. But, yeah, I mean, I'm sure Wertheim could sort of add to this. There are some players who probably, like Serena, like to have a little bit of a tough match early in the tournament to sort of get into the tournament. But you don't ever want to be extended like to 5 or in the women's game to 3 where, you're expecting to be out of there in an hour and you're in a war for 3 or 4 hours. So, probably not the start Felix wanted. The most important thing, though, obviously, is to get through, and then we'll see who comes next.
All right, John Wertheim is on the line right now, Tennis Channel analyst, senior writer at Sports Illustrated. John, thanks for doing this. Yeah, what do you make of 4 sets to start his U.S. Open for Felix Auger-Aliassime?
I just caught the end of what Richard was saying, and I think he's absolutely correct. Not necessarily the time of match Felix probably desired, but it's survive in advance. The alternatives would have been a lot worse. Happy to get through. Not an untalented opponent, and he's young. I mean, Richard's exactly right. If he were 10 years older, and there are plenty of players in the draw who are 10 years older, it would be more of a concern. He has a day off, and he'll be there for the second round, which ultimately is what matters most.
John, one of the things that this major, why this particular U.S. Open is interesting. I'm not sure how interesting it is to ESPN when they're honestly going to look at viewership, but it's interesting writ large in that this feels kind of like what we in tennis are going to have over the next couple of years with Serena and Venus out, with Roger and Rafa out. Obviously, Novak's still around to go for the Grand Slam, but like this tournament, like I can't remember a major which because I guess it hasn't happened. Like I just can't remember a major with the absence of these people who have been in our lives for so long, and it kind of feels like this is what tennis is going to be like over the near term, like the next 2 to 3 years. Is this what this is this what we're going to get, right? This is the kind of draws we're going to get with no Roger, no Rafa, et cetera.
Yeah, everyone sort of talked abstractly about tennis in the post Federer Nadal era, tennis after Serena and Venus, and no one really sort of stopped to think about how this was going to unfold. It's not like Michael Jordan where one day you're here and one day you're not. It's sort of this gradual decline, and you have these 3 titans. I just saw this graphic. It's the first year since 1996. So, first term Bill Clinton that the draw has lacked a Williams, Federer, Nadal. The last 25 years, the draw's had at least one of those players, and none of them are retired. So it's not as though you can sort of have this sentimental send-off, because everyone's sort of still holding out hope that there's still one last run. It's sort of been this gradual decline. I mean, in tennis, age 35 is when you're eligible for the seniors tour. So for tennis equivalent of senior golf, you're eligible at 35. Federer's 40. Serena's going to be 40 in a couple of weeks. Nadal's 35, but has played the amount of tennis and the wear and tear on his body. He may as well be 40 in sort of biological years. In a way, it's crazy we're even still having this conversation. But yeah, I think you're right. This is a glimpse into what tennis is going to look like in the future. This is, I sort of made the analogy. This is the NBA post Jordan, and there are a few years there, and you don't have great ratings, and you wonder who's going to take the mantle. And you know what? Then a LeBron or a Kobe comes along, and things sort of steady. Tennis will persist, and there could be a couple of awkward years, but we'll get through this, and there will be other champions.
Well, isn't Jordan still playing, though? Like, Djokovic isn't yet 35 and has a chance with a victory in 2 weeks to, one, be the first man ever to 21 Grand Slams and to complete the season-long Grand Slam. Like, I know he's not as popular as Roger Federer and never will be, seemingly, but aren't we still watching the greatest player who ever lived, or does he need to win this in 2 weeks to cement that?
Yeah, that's the great mystery to me, and I'm probably as guilty as anyone else. The big storyline has been sort of these absences, and will we ever see Federer again, and will Serena play again? And you want to say, wait a second, we've got a guy here who's going for the Grand Slam, the holy grail of tennis. No man has done it in more than 50 years, no woman since Steffi Graf. This is sort of like the thing in tennis. We've got a guy who's 3/4 of the way there, and this is on the threshold of history. And on top of that, if he wins this tournament, he's going to vault past Federer, Nadal, and win 21 majors and be the all-time. This is like, historically speaking, this will be a 21st major. It'd be the all-time record holder. And you want to say, historically speaking, the storyline of this entire tournament is one guy who has a chance to really sort of elevate to a completely new plane And I feel like we've all sort of missed the forest for the trees at some level. I mean, you're right in the sense of the greatest all time, at least on paper, is not only is he playing right now and still in this tournament, he has a chance at this sort of double-edged history. And people are talking about Naomi Osaka and mental health and COVID. And I feel as though we all sort of obsess over this greatest of all-time race. And now we have a chance for the third guy to vault ahead of the other two. And it's like topic number 3 for all of us. So, I'm glad you brought up Djokovic. It's what you said. He really has a chance to cement himself as the Jordan. And he's the youngest of the big 3. On paper, he's head-to-head winning record against the other 2 guys. I mean, it's very hard to make the case suddenly that he isn't the best of the lot, and now he has a chance to move past them in all-time majors won. So, we'll see. There's a lot of history. It's only going to sort of, it's a compound interest. It's only going to accelerate with every match he wins. We saw what happened when Serena Williams 6 years ago had a chance for the Grand Slam on the women's side, and then we just saw what the pressure did to her, and it will be very interesting to see how Novak Djokovic handles what really is sort of a career-defining tournament for him one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. I think some of the reason why the Novak story isn't bigger has to do with how fans, not every fan, but how many fans feel about Novak fair or unfairly. I want to ask you about Bianca Andreescu, John, just because that's obviously of significant interest to our audience. Her run a couple of years ago was about as compelling as it gets. I think there were people not only in Canada, but globally who thought, this might be the heir to Serena Williams, just given how big she played big points. She had a game that could sort of be a power game and a finesse game. And then obviously injuries came, COVID came, and the story changed. You've been around her, you've interviewed her, and obviously you've seen her play certainly more times than Ben and I have. What are your expectations of her for this, not just this tournament, but as we head over the next year or so when it comes to what Bianca can be on tour?
It's a great question, and I think you laid it out really well, Richard, that it's just there is so much sort of breadth to this answer. I mean, she could be the next big star of the sport. I mean, 2 years ago, she's 19 years old, and she just absolutely owned the sport. And she stared down Serena Williams, and she won big match after big match, and it was on hard courts, and it didn't matter what her form was going into the match. And she had this sort of it was a really nice mix of confidence without bleeding into arrogance. I mean, there was real sort of self-belief, and I don't doubt myself, and she spoke very bluntly, but she was very likable at the same time. It wasn't, here comes this arrogant athlete that needs to be knocked down a peg. And I worry, a lot of the conversation is about how she's holding up physically. She's had a lot of injuries for a player who's only 21, but it's always sort of, those injuries always have a mental component. And sometimes it's riding shotgun, and sometimes it's in the back seat. So sometimes it's you roll your eyes, and sometimes it's much more severe. And she's been through an awful lot, and a lot of setbacks, and a lot of pain, and a lot of rehabs and specialists. And part of that is wear and tear on the body, but also that really can damage your spirit. And when you're 2 years removed from winning a major, and you're the top 5 player, and everything's breaking right, and the rafters are sending you tributes, and then suddenly, it's a Tuesday night in Cincinnati and you're not winning the second round match, that has a real impact. The good news is that careers have never been longer, so she doesn't necessarily feel this pressure of time she would have felt a generation ago. If she does not perform particularly well this week, and then again at this Indian Wells event that she won, her ranking is going to absolutely sort of, the bottom's going to fall out, and she's no longer going to be anywhere near to where she is now in the rankings. But I do think, we've seen enough. There's enough data points on how good she can be that long term I would still be optimistic. It's been a rough year. It's been a rough year with injuries. She got COVID. She's lost close matches. She doesn't have the sort of, can I speak to the manager swagger that she had 2 years ago? But I think sort of long term, she's still a very bright prospect.
Here's hoping. John, we know you got to run. Thanks for doing this.
You got it. Always a pleasure.
See you, John. John Wertheim, Tennis Channel analyst, senior writer at Sports Illustrated. Yeah, Bianca's the great hope. Felix and Denis Shapovalov are as well, and they're still very young, but it just feels like nobody's – I know it's happened, and players have broken through, even when Federer and Nadal had been playing, but it just feels like Djokovic is playing in such a manner. And I know he was down 2-0, I think, in the French Open, still came back and won, but that he will not be denied right now. Like, this is the greatest of all time with a chance to cement that status with the greatest season of all time, that the men's side is kind of closed. Like, I would be shocked beyond belief if anybody other than Novak Djokovic wins this thing on the men's side. But yeah, I don't know. Bianca Andreescu would not, any of her previous most recent results would not indicate that she's going to be a threat at Flushing Meadows, but you never know. It's been 2 years since she's been here. Maybe she just gets the mojo back and she feels healthy. And obviously the women's side's a little more wide open, even though Serena hasn't won a slam in a couple of years. She's in finals and going deep in these slams. But yeah, I think if I were a Canadian tennis fan, that's where I would put my hopes, probably not on the men's side.
Yeah, so two things on this tournament. One, Novak's the favorite, and I'd probably pick him, but he could be beaten. There are guys out there who certainly if Novak's a little off and they're on their game, can beat him, but it's not a big list. And I'm sure he's really significantly motivated to obviously do something that hasn't been done since 1969. Bianca is interesting just because, like you said, Ben, the entire tournament's open on the women's side. You know, there's Ash Barty may be the number one player in the world right now, but that sort of like who really is the number one player in the world has changed dramatically over the last year and a half, 2 years. The reason why I think people in Canada think differently about Bianca is just because she's won a major.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? She won it. Like, that's the difference between her and Denis and Felix, is that at one point, she reached the summit. These guys still have to get there. I mean, Denis made the semis of a major, but that's a long way away from winning. And like you said, they also have Novak in front of them. I'll just be honest, I don't know what to expect from Bianca Andreescu. Her game is, when she's healthy and on, she can beat anybody. Like, there's no question about that. But she hasn't played many matches, and the matches she has played, Ben, she's lost. Mm-hmm. So I think if you're a fan of hers, just go in and just, like, I almost feel like anything good that comes out of this tournament is gravy, because she's really sort of had no kind of positive results in quite some time. She said she was healthy in a pre-tournament interview, I think yesterday or the day before. Yeah. So that's great news. She's got a new coach. Yep. So we'll see how that works out for her. But, Wertheim hit it. If Novak wins this tournament, I think the best of all time debate is closed for now. Nadal can still open that up. Federer could still open that up, although I think for Federer it's going to be much harder given the surgery. But to me, like, that's it. Like, Novak will not only have sort of like placed himself at the top in terms of career majors, he will have done something that Roger and Rafa have never done, which is the Calendar Grand Slam. And so, to me, the conversation's over. And it won't be the end for Novak either. No, he's only 34, like I said. But don't you feel like he's kind of overlooked? Like, yeah. Yes. I mentioned it to John. Not. I mean, he is overlooked. It's not even like, don't you think? It's like, he is. But there are reasons for that. The reason is he played an era with probably the two most popular players of all time on the men's side, and then the two greatest players prior to Novak of all time on the men's side. He's not as, listen, his game is awesome, and I think he's very, very smart. He's actually a very engaging interview, but he doesn't bring you in the way Nadal and Federer do. And I think he's always going to sort of feel like a third fiddle between those two guys who are just like all-timers when it comes to dealing with fans, dealing with media, etc. Yeah. Here's the truth. He's already the greatest of all time. He's younger. He has the same number of slams as Nadal and Federer does, and Nadal's... I agree. I agree with you. Made all of his hay at the French, which is fine. And you know what? Federer does have his one French, but look at the head-to-heads between the three of them. Like, he owns them in not just overall head-to-heads, slam head-to-heads, has the same number of slams, and he's still playing, and he's the favorite. And he, like you said, could do something the other two didn't do and win all 4 slams in 1 year. So, yeah, I think he's going to do that.
All right, let's take a break and come back with more Writer's Block. Ben Ennis, Richard Deitch, Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Writer's Block, Sportsnet 590 The Fan, Ben Ennis and Richard Deitch. And on Friday, we did Gambling Guest on this radio program, myself and Stephen Brunt. It's not like there's never been gambling guests on this radio station before or even on this radio program, but single event gambling became legal in this country and in this province on Friday. It's been legal in more than 20 states for a while now after a Supreme Court ruling, and everybody's trying to catch up. Everybody's trying to wet their beak, including the NFL. Adam Schefter today tweeting, sign of the times, NFL reaching agreements with Fox Bet, BetMGM, PointsBet, and WynnBet to become approved sportsbook operators for the 2021 NFL season. Okay. You know what? That jibes with everything we've seen with the professional North American sports leagues recently. But Tony Dungy, he formerly NFL head coach, and yes, of course, part of the NBC broadcast package of the NFL, quote tweeted it with this. I really don't like seeing this, Adam. When I came into the league, the NFL had a stance against gambling. Now it seems like we've accepted it. I realize it's legal now, but we've all seen the damage gambling can do to lives. I don't think we should be promoting it. Richard, that's interesting. I think Tony he's a little late on that tweet. If this was really a stance that he felt needed to be espoused, it's very much been in the works for years, I would say, the NFL cozying up to professional gambling. It's quite interesting to see a broadcast partner with this stance against something that the league is doing, whether Tony Dungy wants it or not. That's a man putting himself out there in a time in which that's not going to be necessarily popular.
Well, that's not NBC stance.
No.
I mean, obviously, Tony Dungy certainly has a right to his opinion. I would say, and again, I'm not calling Tony Dungy a hypocrite. I don't think he is, but Tony Dungy has to make a choice, right? Does he choose to work for an employer that is going to have commercial endorsements from gaming houses? Does he choose to work for an employer who has who puts beer advertisements on television?
Right.
And a lot of people get killed by drunk drivers. Is he okay with I could sort of play this game for a long time. Is he okay with this medical advertisement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Here's to me, like, for one thing, you're totally right. Like, the gold rush is on. All this money is going to be coming in to Canada now. I mean, a ton of it has come in. Obviously, places like Rogers and Bell are going to want to get in on it. At a certain point, if it's legal in the country, you are negligent in your business interests not to pursue it. That does not mean, obviously, that there are significant potential problems with this, including problem gambling and people losing money, significant money that they can't afford on it. But the government has the government has said that it is legal, and thus, if it's a legal industry, if you're in sports, you'd be foolish not to go into it. Where it really, Ben, to me is fascinating, and I sort of take this a little bit from a U.S. Perspective, is how silly is it that networks are going to have advertisements for the gaming companies on their airwaves, right? The PointsBet, the BetMGM, et cetera. But yet they still are going to shy away from any kind of gambling talk on their broadcasts.
Yeah.
So they're cool with taking the money from all these places, right? They got no moral. They have no moral quandaries about that.
Yeah.
But they're still going to sort of play the game a little bit, right? Of gambling talk is verboten. I'm sure that's coming from the league, by the way. Right. So the NFL, essentially, what they want to do is they want to pocket the millions and billions of dollars that this is going to afford them, but they still want to keep it like a little bit of a secret. It's like, oh man, don't, grandma's got all those cigarettes under her bed. Let's pretend that we don't know that they're there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that, to me, they're the true hypocrites. Because, you know what? You take the money, that's cool. You take it, you're entitled to it. Now be an adult about it. and make this content part of like who you are, because you got no problems taking their cash.
Yeah. Al Michaels has no problem with the little subtle thing, but yeah,
Exactly.
the explicit conversation about the point spread and how, I mean, listen, anybody that watches an NFL game understands that even in a blowout, these games could be interesting. Why not bring that to the broadcast if you're already in 100%. Bed with gambling anyways? Before we break, I also want to bring this up because it was announced today, or was reported today. We already know the Manning brothers are going to do an alternate broadcast on Monday Night Football on ESPN. I think they have a deal for 10 games over the next couple of years, but they're going to do Week 1 Monday Night Football, I believe. And it was reported today.
This is correct.
They will not have a host.
Correct.
I don't necessarily want to dump on the current Monday Night Football crew. They're fine, and I think they're an improvement, but I can't see a scenario where if I had a choice of both, and I don't know if in this country we will, but I can't imagine a scenario where I would want anything other than the two Mannings, even without a host. In fact, without a host, it makes it more interesting. It's just two brothers who obviously have chemistry because they're brothers, talking about the game that they love, the game that they know inside and out throughout the course of the game. I'm really curious to see how popular this becomes and whether it's a wave of the future. And I love a good play-by-play, and I, for a good portion of my career, wanted to do it and still think there's great value in it, and obviously, especially on radio. But how many games do you watch with the sound down in a bar or paying attention to having a conversation and not listening necessarily to the play-by-play? We know what's happening in the game. The idea that you could just listen in to a conversation between the Manning brothers while the Monday Night Football game is going on, I think is extremely interesting.
Yeah, and I will say to you that I think you're going to end up being significantly in the minority, and I'll tell you
Really?
why. Yeah, because a lot of people in the sports media business like megacasts, and they love the idea of the coach's film room. And I can tell you, as somebody who ultimately writes about the viewership of this stuff, it's very low. Coach's film room, like for the college football megacast, drew 300,000 viewers. The regular broadcast drew 18 million. The Mannings are a little bit different because obviously Peyton and Eli are big names, and I think there will be a significant curiosity factor for that first telecast. So I'll be curious to see what kind of numbers they do. I would honestly, Ben, be very surprised if they drew more than 1 million viewers, while the main game draws 13, 14,
I'm probably too
close
to it, is what you're saying. Like I
think so.
Yeah.
I mean, again, this is not to like the product could be great. I would have went with a host personally, but we'll see how that works out. But I'm just telling you that there's a comfort level among viewers more than you think about wanting the main broadcast and something they're used to, and the camera images the way they're used to. Because even in the Manning broadcast, like trust me, there are going to be shots of Peyton and Eli talking, right? That's going to be very different for a viewer than everything we're used to with Monday Night Football, which is, graphics and you're always on the screen and the analysts being able to sort of draw the plays and stuff. So we'll see if this turns out to be, the true difference maker where they're bringing in 2 million, 3 million viewers, something like that. Well, then it's game changing.
Yeah.
Then you've just created an additional broadcast platform that could really be monetized and really be significant. But I would my history tells me to expect less people listening to this, watching this thing than you might expect.
That's interesting. And I wonder if the ease in which it's accessible or lack thereof.
Behave. It's very hard to change behavior in life, and most people just they know at 8:30 on Monday. Here's the channel I go to for this game.
Right. No, it's true. Yeah, not everybody talks about sports 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, and are looking for something different. I suppose. You know what? I suppose that's true. Will not definitively say it so, but yeah, you might be right. Hey, George Springer might play in a baseball game for the Toronto Blue Jays tonight. Blue Jays start a 3-game series, the first of 10 games against the Baltimore Orioles tonight down at Rogers Center, in a game they got to have, including tomorrow, including Wednesday. They got to have these games if they want to make September interesting. We'll talk to Shai Davidi about George Springer's availability, maybe a little Nate Pearson in there as well. Hey, Julian Merriweather may appear at the Major League level at some point this season. That's next. Writer's Block continues. Ben Ennis, Richard Deitch, Sportsnet 590 The Fan.
You're listening to Writer's Block with Jeff Blair, Stephen Brunt, and Richard Deitch on the Sportsnet Radio Network.
It is Riders Block, Sportsnet 59 of the Fan, Ben Ennis and Richard Deitch, and Ben Wagner on Twitter just moments ago, tweeting out video of George Springer again running the bases, again looking good. Perhaps today is the day. Our next guest would have a pretty good indication as the Blue Jays start 3-game series against, I think it's fair to call them the hapless Baltimore Orioles. They have a little bit more hap than when they were losing 19 in a row. Shai Davidi joins us online right now. How's it going, Shai? You there, Shai?
Yeah. Hey.
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. Springer and the potential of his return happening tonight. Where's your percentages lie on that?
Well, here, I'll give you the latest. So he did his running. Then he met in the infield with manager Charlie Montoyo, head trader Jose Ministral, and strength trainer Scotty Weberg. They had a discussion. Afterwards, they fist bumped and had smiles, and then they walked into the Blue Jays clubhouse with GM Ross Atkins. So, I don't know. That looked positive to me, but who knows? So that is the very latest.
Wow, that's very good description and detail.
Fist bumps, smiles. That's enough for me. I put it at 100%. He's playing tonight.
Journalism City. Usually, am I correct? Like the lineup usually comes out between 4 and 5 p.m. Eastern. So we should get a resolution on this either way shortly.
Yeah, I would expect so. Ross Atkins is going to meet with us in about half an hour, and I expect if we don't have final word before then, it'll come right then and there. And look, I think the plan is for him to be batting leadoff tonight as usual. If all things are a go for him. And so, I think they've got two plans right now. And, one of them is with Springer at leadoff, and one of them is if he needs another day. But, you seem to be getting after it and, making aggressive hard turns, the kind that, in theory you would need to make if you're trying to score on a, from first on a ball in the gap or something along those lines. So, I think he did not seem uncomfortable. He didn't grab at his knee at any point. So it looked like everything was positive. But again, this is a Mugs game. It's been that way for a long time. So, we won't assume until we get definitive word.
Yeah, no, let's not do that. It's weird. Okay. It's not weird because George Springer's incredible and has been incredible before he arrived as a Blue Jay. He's been incredible when he's been healthy, wearing a Toronto Blue Jays uniform. He did play the first 6 games of that West Coast road trip through Anaheim, through Seattle, and of course got hurt in the second game of the Seattle series. They were still kind of scoring runs during that span. Maybe not in the Seattle series, but they just put up a 10 spot in Anaheim in the third game of that series. And basically, since he's left the lineup, the offense is cratered. One man should not have that kind of impact on an offense. I wouldn't think, Shai, but it's pretty remarkable how poorly the Blue Jays offense has performed basically as soon as they lost George Springer.
Well, to me, I think there's two things. If you look at the offense, if they weren't creating innings and creating opportunities, then you'd be like, oh, dear Lord, what's going on here? But to me, it's just been mind-boggling to have such an extended stretch of poor hitting with runners in scoring position, right? You can go back to virtually every game in the last, week and a half, 2 weeks, and you can find multiple opportunities for them to have cracked the game open, and it just didn't happen. So, to me, I think you're really concerned if you're not creating innings. I think right now it's really just lack of execution because they're a hit away from blowing out teams night in and night out, and that's not happening. And so, to me, that's what's really head scratching about this. It's not that the offense has completely gone. It's that the big blow has disappeared.
Yeah, and that's so hard to put your finger on. And, you talk to different people and they say different things, but the numbers have been incredible with runners in scoring position in a negative sense. Since that Red Sox series, they're hitting 181 with runners in scoring position. Honestly, I thought it would have been worse than that. They went 0 for 10 yesterday and still won a baseball game, but they're 29th in baseball over that span. Only the Mets have been worse, and they've been significantly worse. But they've been a massive disappointment all season long. Is that does the organization, do you, as someone who's watched the sport your entire life, believe that that is something, a skill? Do you believe that hitting with runners in scoring position is a skill? Does this organization believe it's a skill? Do they believe that as a young player you learn how to hit with runners in scoring position? Or is this just one of those things, man, baseball is crazy, and sometimes you go through stretches like that?
Well, I mean, in over a relatively small sample size, that could happen, right? And then if you adjust it against the hitting with runners in scoring position over the course of the season, you're like, okay, well, this is clearly an aberration. This is an outlier stretch. But is it a skill? I don't know. There are those people who say absolutely, people who rise to the moment. I'm not sure it's necessarily that. I'm more of the theory that it's the guys who don't change their approach in those situations and who are able to treat it like a normal at bat and just let their abilities shine through in those moments. I think that's sort of the way to get it done. Like baseball is one of those sports where, if you're going to try to effort something and, really try to say like, oh, I'm going to do my best to hit here in this situation, sometimes that's going to get in the way. So I don't know. Like to me, if this was something, if it was a longer stretch of time, then you'd say, okay, there's an issue here. But I think right now it's just a very, very bizarre 2-week stretch, and something that is, complete opposite to what's happened in the 4.5 months beforehand.
Shai, it's like I am guilty, as I'm sure a lot of people in this industry are guilty of sort of like making proclamations about the schedule and saying, okay, like this has to happen. And if this doesn't happen, that's it. And Mr. Ben Ennis, I think, tweeted out something like, Jays are about to go, 64-0. And if it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But here's where I feel like, seriously, I finally believe we have reached a point in the season where if I feel like I am saying this and it's not hyperbole, it's legit. The 3-game stretch against Oakland and the 4-game stretch against the Yankees after these Orioles series. Like, I feel like we're going to know by September 9th if the season is over or if the season extends. Like, to me, I'm giving them 3 wins in Baltimore. I realize any team could beat any team on any given day, et cetera, whatever. But, like, I really feel like they have to win both of those series to have any shot of pulling off, like, what feels like a semi-miracle kind of late run. But are you with me on that? Like, the season comes down to, I think at the moment, those 4 games at New York, which are really, really tough, and then a very tough Oakland team at home. But that's your season right there. Like, you got to win both those series to me, or we're talking about a September where they just roll between 4 games out, 6 games out, 5 games out, 7 games out, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine a pathway if that doesn't happen, right? Because you already have to leapfrog teams, you already have to close ground. They do have the couple games in hand, which will help, but that's the best case scenario. That's only going to allow you to gain 1 game, and it's not going to really swing the standings. Whereas, if they lose both those series, they're just going to be buried at this point. So. I don't think that's hyperbolic on your end. I think it's just the reality of where we are. If this was a month ago, I don't think you'd be saying that, or even 2 weeks ago, I don't think necessarily you'd be saying it. But they're just out of runway at this point. And if you're going to make a move, like it's got really they needed to have taken at least 5 of the 6 against Detroit, not gone 3-3. That's pushing back and putting more pressure on the schedule. They're at the point where you almost have to go, 8-2 or 9-1 against Baltimore if you're going to make up ground, and even better 10-0, obviously. Yeah. But they're just not at a point anymore where they can afford to shed games, and those 2 series are an opportunity for them to make a move in the standings because you're taking wins away from the team you're chasing directly. And at a certain point, you're just not going to be able to get enough help from the teams around you.
Yeah, I got to take care of business against the Baltimore Orioles starting tonight. Talking to Shai Davidi of Sportsnet, sportsnet.ca. So I like being right, and I feel like I was right about Alejandro Kirk. Now, it does it does help my case that the Blue Jays are doing everything in their power to create offense, and they're going to put forward their best offensive lineup if it's not their overall best lineup recently, because just the hits have been so few and far between and hard to come by. So Alejandro Kirk is getting into all these games, but has he not established himself yet again as this team's number one catcher? Obviously, the DH opportunities will dry up if George Springer needs that position, but seems like he's playing almost every day between catching and DHing over the last week or so.
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly finding ways for him to get his bat in the lineup. And look, I think there are still, there have been improvements, and obviously, you have to give him some latitude for being a young player, but there's still some, defensive areas there where you're like, okay, you're waiting for him to get better at. And so, I think that they have to weigh the offensive need versus the defensive need on a given day. I think you'll continue to see, obviously, Reese McGuire catch for Hyunjin Ryu. And on certain days where, the defense is a bit more of a priority, I still think that you want to go with Reese McGuire in those days. And, it'll be interesting to see when Danny Jansen comes back, presumably once the rosters expand on Wednesday. I expect we'll see him sometime shortly thereafter, how he fits in the mix, because, he's the best defender of the three. But, there is a balance that you're going to have to strike. And, the Blue Jays tend to prioritize their, the defensive part of the catcher's responsibilities. They want to ensure their pitchers are being handled in the best possible way, understandably so. But the offense has been so dry, and Kirk has been, one of the few guys who's given you a reliable at bat that it's almost been impossible to take him out of the lineup.
Shay, it's a pretty cool sign. And again, I don't know when it will manifest itself again, but I love that Tim Meza closed the Tigers game. Just to have someone else on the roster other than Romano, who Charlie feels like, okay, if I have to, I can send this guy in to get the final out of game. No doubt they thought Brad Hand would be that guy, and you'd be able to use him in certain situations. I don't think you can at the moment. But I feel like that's a small little win that maybe in one of these games in September, especially if, let's say, Romano, threw 25, 30 pitches the night before, I feel like now there's a guy who can come in. I feel a little confident this guy can get the last out.
I mean, look, you have to have that, right? And they called on Jordan Romano on Saturday to get 6 outs, and he was able to do that. That's what they needed to win the ball game. But if you don't have that reliable second option, then you're never going to go on a run, especially if your offense isn't scoring. And since June 1st, Tim Meza has been unreal. I haven't checked on it in the last week or so, but at the beginning of last week, the OPS against since June 1st was 346. I mean, he's just given up nothing. And so, Tim Meza has certainly been progressing towards that, and he's earned that opportunity, and he's earned the leverage, he's earned the trust. And look, if not for Tim Meza's emergence and Jordan Romano's consistency, even though he had a little bit of a blip, but it wasn't a very extended one, this bullpen would be in absolutely dire straits, even worse than what it has been. So, Tim Meza, it is a great story, and I totally understand that part of it. But, it's so essential, and it's been such a fundamental issue for this team all year long to not have those secondary options, and all too often to not be able to even get the ball in the hands of Tim Meza, let alone Jordan Romano.
Well, a couple of those options pitched at Salem Field on Saturday. Julian Merriweather, who I'd written off, I thought his latest shutdown was shut down for the season. Apparently not. And Nate Pearson, who threw a bunch of strikes, which was a departure from his previous outing, but did give up a couple of hits, a couple of strikeouts as well. Feels like we're day to day with whether they're going to call Pearson up. Does he need to string together multiple good appearances? Because the one prior to that, I think he threw 7 of 18 pitches for strikes. It was a real concerning box score and a real concerning piece of video if you saw the highlights from his appearance in Buffalo 2 games ago. but that's a little bit better. He was throwing strikes, the 2 strikeouts. I don't know if they were concerned that he's given up contact at all. Like, where are we on Pearson?
So Pearson is essentially it's outing to outing. It's trying to assess what he's bringing at a given time and what it looks like, and then also, is there an immediate need on the roster, right? Because if the roster spots are stable, then I don't think the Blue Jays at this point are going to disrupt it just to bring a guy in. So those are my understanding. Those are the considerations how they're weighing that. And Julian Merriweather obviously fits in similarly, but I think with him it's ensuring that the health is there. And then, look, if the health is there and he's throwing the ball the way that it was, then the Blue Jays are very clearly going to find a way to get him there, but back on the roster. But with Nate Pearson, I think they want to make sure that it's better than and more consistent and more reliable than what they're sending down. And, I think clearly to this point they haven't been yet convinced that he's ready. And, as soon as but again, as soon as there's a bit of a need, I think that'll open up a pathway. But now Merriweather's putting pressure on that pathway as well.
Shai, one last one from me. I saw that Santiago Espinal went on the DL. Can you make the presumption that Kevin Smith will get his at-bats until he's healthy, and then is a decision made between the two of them in terms of who gets whatever at-bats like a theoretical third base starter would get?
Yeah, I mean, I still think they'll work Breivik Valera in there on occasion too, especially if it's a tougher righty in a matchup that they don't like quite as much right on right. But this is Smith's opportunity for sure, and I think they're intrigued by what he did at AAA Buffalo obviously, but it's more if he can translate a little bit of that here right now, then he's going to give them offense. And, the defense is solid enough. It's not Santiago Espinal's defense by any stretch, but it's solid enough. And then you have some upside with the bat. So, I think right now he's definitely going to get a little bit of run. And, they'll match up as they usually do, find ways to make sure that Breivik Valera doesn't get hung out to dry there. But, this is his opportunity. And, I don't think they'll make it impossible for Santiago Espinal to play when he gets back, but it may very well be able to take some at-bats away from him.
Yeah, I mean, if he just comes up with a homer a game, it will be very difficult for Santiago Espinal to return. He looked good in that jacket, though, got to say. Shai, great stuff, buddy. Enjoy the game tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad you always have the reasonable expectations. Right?
Yes.
Homer a game, no problem, right?
Well, why not?
Just project that out. Right?
All right. See you, buddy.
Yeah, take care, guys.
See ya. You too. There's Shai Davidi, Sportsnet and Sportsnet.ca. The jacket is great, Richard. I like the jacket. It's unique. I liked the Red Sox going in the laundry basket celebration after home run when they first started. It's worn a little thin recently. The danger with these home run celebrations is you have to do them after every home run, and especially if you're a rookie and you hit your first home, you want to wear that jacket. Sometimes when you're a team with playoff expectations and you're in the midst of losing 2-3 to the Detroit Tigers, and it's a meaningless home run at the end of the ball game, there's a sheepish look that comes with wearing the home run jacket. There should be I don't know, guidelines to the homer jacket and a score in which the jacket gets put away for the night.
Thanks, Eastwood. Get off my lawn, guy.
Yeah, you think
Relax.
you wear the jacket whenever you hit a home run? Doesn't matter.
What's the famous what's that Eastwood movie when he's an angry guy on the front his front lawn?
Gran Torino.
Gran Torino. I was trying to make a Gran Torino reference. Yeah, no, there's no problem with the jacket. Let these guys have fun. It's actually sometimes the silliest things in pro sports actually bond like teams. You know how many times you've heard stories of like a wrestling belt that somebody buys and they carry it around the locker room. So let them have the fun. You obviously got, if you're down 10-2, you can't be parading in the jacket for 20 minutes. But the laundry basket thing, the jacket is cool. I was actually happy for Kevin Smith. He had never had a shot at the jacket. He puts the jacket on. It seems like the guys like it. It's probably not gonna last until next year.
Yeah,
but
probably not.
these symbols are good. Like I mean, as dumb as it sounds, like they do connect the team. I'd rather be reading about the jacket than player X is ticked off at player Y because he lost $800 in a poker game on the plane flight and nobody's paying anybody. Like bad chemistry could be bad chemistry too.
Yeah, maybe Javi Baez wouldn't be giving the fans the finger at Citi Field if he had the jacket.
You're more of a baseball guy than me. He's beloved though in Chicago, right? Like they love that guy.
Yeah, he won a World Series. Yeah,
so
he's a pending free agent. But here's the thing about players of his ilk, and the danger is that Bo Bichette is that way, is that he's never been a high on-base guy. He hits for an incredible average, and he has incredible power. But once you start swinging and missing just a little bit more, which Baez is and leads the National League in strikeouts.
He's 28, though. I mean, someone's going to sign him. I mean, we're not talking about a 35-year-old guy.
No, someone will sign him. It won't be for the price tag you would have imagined.
Yeah, right. I'm sure the money... one of the most interesting guys this year when it comes to free agency is Simeon. Yeah. By the way, who the Blue Jays aren't going to re-sign. I trust me, it sucks, and I'm just telling you the reality of it. There's too much depth at that position in the organization. They have to spend capital elsewhere. But it's very tricky to price him. Yeah. Because, the numbers, Ben, would suggest that, he's, whatever, $20, $25 million player.
No, I know. We talk about Corey Seager. And he could be better than Corey Seager.
But here's the question is, one, are you paying him as a shortstop or a second baseman? And two, who's paying him?
Yeah.
And so, that's going to be fascinating. And I mean, it's going to be very frustrating for Blue Jays fans. I know he's a West Coast guy, so I don't know if he'd want this, but man, doesn't it feel like the Yankees are going to try to line up and get that guy?
Yeah.
I think Gleiber, they could use a more reliable middle infielder, and he just seems to slot into that team perfectly.
Yeah, but does he want to shave the goatee? It's something he's got to think about, because I think he's meant to have a goatee.
I know. A lot of these guys sort of are like, I don't want to play in New York. I don't want to follow the rules. And then a $30 million offer comes in and all of a sudden, they're doing ads for Abercrombie and Fitch. Yeah. So what I'm saying? They're willing to, they're willing to look the other way perhaps for the case. That would really tick me off though, because Marcus Semien has been awesome. I know about the play at second base, but that was a great signing by the Jays. It was found money. Mm-hmm. He's been phenomenal. And you just wish I don't know. That's the kind of thing that a big market team just re-signs the guy and whatever, it's just cash. It's just going to make us better. It extends the lineup, but I know it's not going to happen. I know he's not going to do it.
Well, they might make a competitive offer, but as you mentioned it, he's going to be highly coveted. It's hard to imagine that somebody isn't going to be able to match whatever.
Would Oakland
I think
throw down the money? And
probably not.
Screwed up,
considering that their offer to him in free agency, I think was $10 million spread out over 50 years or something, where he got paid 50, the Bobby Bonilla deal, except was for 1/100th of what Bobby Bonilla got.
I don't know.
Yeah, so probably not going back to Oakland.
And plus, you got to sign Ray, right? I mean, you have to prioritize. So if you're going to break the bank, I think that's where you have to break the bank.
Agreed. Let's take a break and talk to one of the best, Ian Eagle, the NFL on CBS, voice of the Brooklyn Nets as well on the Yes Network. He's going to be calling the season opener for the Buffalo Bills against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll talk to him about that. Maybe as a New York guy, take his temperature on the Javi Baez situation and more next. Ian Eagle, when we return. Writer's Block continues. Ben Ennis, Richard Deitch, Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Writer's Block, Sportsnet 590 The Fan, Ben Ennis and Richard Deitch. And a couple of breaking news items in the NFL today. One, Carson Wentz, suffering the injury in preseason, went on the COVID list today. No reports as to whether that's a breakthrough infection, whether he's been vaccinated or not. And also, there's all kinds of trade rumors surrounding Deshaun Watson and the Miami Dolphins. And Brian Flores with some interesting Comments.
Yeah, let's save that for the last segment because I want to talk about that.
Okay.
I got some things to say.
All right, we'll save that for then. Why don't we talk Bills to start, at least, with our next guest, Ian Eagle of the NFL on CBS. He will be on the call. Bills Steelers Week 1 alongside Charles Davis and Evan Washburn. Ian, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, Ben? Richard, how you doing?
Doing very well. We're about to get right into the busy season for you. It's always busy for you. You never stop. But this Bills team, I know they were a playoff team 2 years ago. But they finished second in their division behind New England. And then they win the division, and they get to an AFC championship game. They have all the expectations in the world of winning that division and maybe making a Super Bowl, though Patrick Mahomes isn't going anywhere. But at least getting back to an AFC championship game. How different is it going to be for them going into this type of a season with that type of expectation?
You know, it strikes me, the fact that I get this assignment, and under normal circumstances in all my previous years working at CBS, if I had Buffalo-Pittsburgh to open the season, the majority of the questions to me and the interest would be on Pittsburgh, about the Steelers and what's going on there. Are they a Super Bowl team? All the things that we've grown accustomed to in regards to Steelers conversation. And yet it's been all Buffalo dominated. And that shows you that there's been a shift in the NFL and how quickly things can change. And in a 2-year period, you're right. 2 years ago, playoff team, but they were not a huge topic of conversation going into last year. But the leap that Josh Allen made, the difference that Stephon Diggs made, the fact that the culture is legitimately real, it's producing consistent winning, it's changed everything. It's changed the perception around the NFL, and it's changed the reality. The reality is the Buffalo Bills are one of the teams to beat, and they're one of the premier squads in the NFL going into the 21 season. And that's a real achievement. That means that this franchise has taken a big step forward.
And this is a little bit of a television-centric question. But do you think the Bills are at the place yet where their star is a national draw to someone, let's say, watching in Miami or Seattle or Montana? Or do they need, in your opinion, one more year of like the kind of success they had last year where, maybe you don't think of them as the Cowboys or the Packers, but they're in that sort of tier of really hot teams that you're interested in outside of your market?
Yeah, I think, Richard, they're on the precipice of that. I would use Kansas City as the most recent example of a team that always had interest, and they had a national following, but they were not considered in that upper echelon tier of TV teams. And then Patrick Mahomes changed that. They're getting primetime games. They're getting the coveted 4:00 spot on CBS consistently. And that wasn't really happening with Alex Smith. It just wasn't. What changed? Patrick Mahomes changed that. I think Josh Allen, the season he had last year, MVP level play, if he repeats that performance and the Bills are a 13-win team, 13, 14 wins in a 17-game season, then they'll knock the door down. People are going to be interested in this squad, and you can already feel it. Just based on the reaction when I was assigned this game, it really was the first time that I can remember where people were leading with the Bills narrative more so than the Steeler narrative, and that's quite a switch.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that other team, though, because that other team is pretty interesting, too. and what's happened to Ben Roethlisberger with the health and the comeback. And, I mean, he's going to be 40 in March, which, I mean, Tom Brady laughs at. Like, that was not an issue for him at all. Different style of play, I would say. Taking a different type of beating throughout their career, those two quarterbacks. Where's the level of belief that Ben Roethlisberger can shake off the injury history and put together something close to a vintage performance this season?
Yeah, I know this is not a popular answer, but I don't know. I really don't know with Big Ben. I go back to last year. They got off to the terrific start, and I'm not sure that even Mike Tomlin necessarily believed that they had the kind of team that was equipped to go out and win a Super Bowl. They won a bunch of close games. And then when the bottom dropped out, it was a pretty sudden drop. and a lot of it was attributable to Ben Roethlisberger and his drop-off in play. Now, all the claims are that he feels better, he looks a little bit lighter, his arm strength is back to where it was pre-injury. You're right. It's year 19. And how many more times can Ben answer the bell? Does he have another year in him where he can lead the team and can guide the team? And I just don't know if you can rely on him at that level anymore. The one thing I'll say, even amidst all his success, guys, Ben Roethlisberger always used this as motivation. He always used, they're disrespecting me, they're disrespecting us as a team. That's always fueled him. So I know it's going to fuel him again this year, maybe even more so, because there have been more naysayers than the past. But just the physical part of it, at 39 years old, on the verge of turning 40, how many more hits can he take? How many more comebacks can he lead? And is this supporting cast good enough? The offensive line isn't what it used to be. That used to be the bread and butter. You could say, hey, no matter what, he's got one of the best offensive lines in football. You can't say that anymore.
So, Ian, you, Charles Davis, Evan Washburn back with you guys again?
Yes.
All right.
Troika.
I was hoping it was Evan Mobley, who I really like as a player coming up in this year's draft.
Really, we'll take any Evan, except
you'll take any Evan.
Tremendous
That's right.
hair. So we have the best hair in the industry.
Good hair team. All right. So you obviously last year, even through COVID protocols, et cetera, called a lot of significant games for CBS. What was a team that you saw in person last year that you just made a note to yourself, like, I think they're going to take a leap in 2021, and here's why?
I'd say the Chargers, because nobody's really talking about them, the change at head coach. Herbert blew me away last year. We had them in Tampa, and it required every last bit of Tom Brady's magic to come back and win that game against the Chargers. I think they're flying under the radar a little bit. And I know first-year coaches can Staley step in and lead the team and make the tough decisions. Hey, we saw it in Green Bay. There are guys that can step in year one and realize you go with the hoss that got you there. And Justin Herbert is that guy right now. I'm just really impressed with him. And I think offensively they're going to be highly competitive. I think and I know they'll be better defensively. They've got some pieces coming back. They've got a defensive mindset. So that's the one team that I would keep an eye on that maybe has not gotten a whole lot of attention that might surprise some people and get better as the year goes on.
Talking to Ian Eagle, and I know you're in football mode, but I do want to talk a little bit about the Nets because they're so intriguing to me. Ian, and of course, Ian calls Brooklyn Nets games on the Yes Network, and that iconic moment in the playoffs. I mean, I saw Kevin Durant doing his best, like 2015 LeBron James against the Golden State Warriors impression, where he had absolutely nobody. And I know James Harden played in those games, not really, but it was incredible to watch, unbelievable to watch. And there's not any part of me that doesn't think the Nets win it all if KD's foot is not on the three-point line in Game 7. How will that play be remembered? Because it was only the second round, too, right? So I guess we have to have that context. But I'll remember it forever, and I'll remember the KD performance in those 7 games forever. But it's hard because it's the second round, and he didn't come up very large in the overtime either.
Yeah, the sliding doors film that we often talk about. I'm not sure it was a classic. I don't want to put it on that level, but it was a good movie, Gwyneth Paltrow. But the whole theory behind it is what intrigues me, because if Kevin Durant's foot is behind the line and they win the game and they knock out the Bucks, it changes history as we know it. Giannis Antetokounmpo is considered an underachiever. That would have been year 3 as an underachiever. Mike Budenholzer is fired as the head coach of the Bucks. Chris Paul maybe wins a championship with the Phoenix Suns because the Nets are overmatched. James Harden is a shell of himself, and Kyrie Irving never comes back. Or the Atlanta Hawks pull off an upset in the conference finals and go to the NBA finals because the Nets are just decimated. It's just amazing to me, the domino effect. This year, if you're talking about a healthy group, and those 3 with a full training camp, a full season, a real season, not the truncated season that we saw last year, I just don't see who can stop them. I know the Lakers made a lot of changes. I know they have a lot of talent. You're talking about Kevin Durant still in his prime with the motivated Harden and Kyrie Irving healthy. I think it's a battle for number 2 in the NBA, and it's a pretty big drop-off between 1 and 2.
I tend to agree with you. And one follow on that is, let's make the presumption that those 3 guys can play together, and it sort of just works on the court. What you usually then need is you need 2 other players at all times to know their role and be satisfied with less shots, etc. I know when Joe Harris is in, he's got an obvious role in terms of sort of spacing and opening up shooting. But will Blake Griffin be back in a certain who are the other guys you think that ultimately have to give a little bit of themselves up to make it work if those 3 guys are on the court all at the same time?
I think it's also stage of career, Richard, more than anything else. Blake Griffin, this stage of his career, he's certainly not the all-star he once was. He's not the high flyer he once was. You see little bits of it here and there. Patty Mills, this stage of his career, another chance at a championship, something he did in San Antonio. I think he welcomes it. And then the other guys, as you alluded to, Bruce Brown, who they did re-sign, really important role player. Nicholas Claxton, does he develop at the rate they believe he could develop? These are all guys that should play a role, but it really does come down to those 3. And I don't even think it's a question anymore, can they play together? Mm-hmm. We saw enough to know that egos aside, they get it. There's just this magical quality when the 3 of them are on the court, but they got to stay there, and that's a big if considering the injury issues that they've all dealt with the last couple of years.
No doubt. I can't wait to see it, though. I can't wait to watch you on the call of Bills Steelers Week 1. Thanks for doing this, Ian.
Yeah, looking forward to it, guys. Always nice joining you, and enjoy this NFL season. I think it's going to be fun.
I will. Thanks, Ian. See ya. It was Ian Eagle, the NFL on CBS. Yeah, the Nets are the team to beat in the NBA, and I think, if they're healthy, they win it all last year. And there's no doubt that they're the team to beat. The only question surrounding them is health.
I agree. And, if nothing else for Raptors, it'll be fun to see this team go up against that team and to see what kind of, we'll see what kind of matchup that is in the effort. They played them pretty tough last year, although, again, with a couple of those stars out. But I'm with you, Ben. If they stay healthy, I don't know how they don't make the finals. I think Durant's motivated, especially after what happened last year. That's my team to make the finals.
Agreed. All right. We have some breaking Blue Jays lineup news, which we will present to you after the break. It is Writer's Block. Ben Ennis, Richard Deitch, Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Final segment, Writer's Block, Sportsnet 590 The Fan, Ben Ennis and Richard Deitch coming up at the top of the hour. 2-hour edition of Baseball Central. Blair and Barker, and no doubt they will be talking about tonight's leadoff man, which is George Springer. So the smiles and high fives and backslaps was all real. Enough running of the bases for George Springer, which I think is like 5 consecutive before the games. Sessions of running the bases. He is in the lineup tonight. So a potential, if he plays all 33 of the remaining games, to play 82 games in his debut season for the Toronto Blue Jays, Richard. They needed him in a big way. Even against the Baltimore Orioles, they can't score runs.
Yeah, listen, it's great news. And let's just hope he's healthy for the rest of the season. And now you take your shot. I mean, you do the math, Ben. I don't know. You're going to have to play. I mean, should we be realistic? Like 670, 680 ball to make it, or is it higher? Just being honest. It's not inconceivable. You got the O's a ton of times, but you're looking at having you're almost going to have to be the best team in baseball to make the wild card. But they do have it in them. Mm-hmm. And Springer changes this lineup. And I think it will be fascinating, Ben, if he comes into the lineup tonight and they put up like big numbers. And it's just something about this guy coming back that maybe just makes everybody just a little easier and maybe a little less pressure down the lineup.
Might have something to do with playing the Baltimore Orioles, but of course, that's the connection we're all going to make. Yeah. It's true. It was something that I wondered aloud about with Shai Davidi. But this offense has been so bad. There's only one place to go but up, and getting a guy that's already been American League Player of the Week twice this season and who has a 972 OPS, it's certainly going to help your cause, and a 362 on base. We only have a couple minutes here, but I mentioned it. At the absolute best, that if he plays every single game, which is hardly assured considering the injury history he's not only suffered with the knee, but of course the leg before that. But if he does play all 33, he'll be at 82 games, which is just over half a season for a guy on a 6-year, $150 million deal in year one. But when he's been healthy, he's been outstanding. He's been unbelievable. Like you said, he might have been the guy that rocketed this Blue Jays lineup into, at times, the best OPS in all of baseball. Even currently with their dip, they're second in baseball, only to the Houston Astros in OPS. There's 5 years still to go on this thing, but was year one a success or a failure? And does it impact how you view the final 5 years on this contract, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, it's neither. It depends on how you grade, obviously, right? I mean, I guess anything other than 150 games, massive numbers is a quote-unquote failure, but I give him an incomplete. Like, I'm not grading George Springer until I see him have a full season. Knock on wood, I hope I see some full seasons. But that's the grade I'd give him this year. I mean, when he was in, he was excellent. He clearly had he clearly struggled at the beginning of the year with injuries. And I